Once upon a time, in a small village nestled along the banks of a flowing river, there lived a young woman named Amina. Amina was known for her vibrant energy and adventurous spirit. She dreamed of exploring distant lands, experiencing different cultures, and living a life filled with freedom. Every day, she would gaze out over the river, imagining herself sailing on its waters, far from the responsibilities of village life. She was content, living in a world where she could come and go as she pleased. But one fateful day, Amina's life changed forever. Amina discovered that she was pregnant. At first, the news overwhelmed her. She had never thought about becoming a mother. She hadn't even considered the possibility of a child in her life. The thought of raising a baby seemed impossible. Amina had big dreams. Dreams that would be impossible to achieve if she had a child. How could she travel the world, see new places, and follow her heart when she was tied to the land, to a home, and to a baby who would need her every day? She spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she would handle the situation. Her heart was full of confusion and fear. How could she continue living her life, full of adventure and freedom, with a baby? She couldn't. She wouldn't. And that was when the idea first crossed her mind, a dark thought that would change the course of her life forever. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a journey that would define her existence. Days turned into weeks, and as Amina's pregnancy progressed, so did her fears. The villagers noticed that Amina wasn't quite the same. Her radiant smile, once present on every occasion, had faded into a quiet, distant expression. She moved through the village as if walking in a fog, lost in her thoughts. Every time she passed a group of children playing, laughing, or calling for their mothers, her heart sank a little more. She was terrified of what motherhood would mean for her. Amina had been raised in the village, but her dreams had always been bigger than the small, familiar world she knew. Now, those dreams seemed impossible to reach. The idea of a child, dependent on her for everything, was a weight she could not bear. It felt like a prison she couldn't escape. She wondered if she could ever be happy again if she became a mother. As the days dragged on, Amina tried to reason with herself. She could find a way to raise the child, she thought. But deep inside, she knew she wasn't ready. And that's when the seed of an even darker thought began to grow. She couldn't raise this child. She didn't want to be a mother. But there had to be a way out. It seemed like such a burden, this baby that had come into her life without warning. Answer, in her confusion and fear, Amina began to plan. She began to think about ways to rid herself of the responsibility that was taking over her mind and heart. The river, so beautiful and powerful, called to her. Its waters moved swiftly, as if it held the answer to her troubles. The day of Amina's labor came, and the entire village seemed to hold its breath. There was joy in the air, as newborns were always cause for celebration. The midwives gathered, the women of the village smiled, and the sound of drums echoed in the distance. Yet, Amina felt no joy. She was filled with dread. Her daughter was born, a small, delicate girl with wide, dark eyes and a head full of black curls. The village women cooed and praised her, offering congratulations and advice. Amina held her daughter for the first time, and for a moment, she tried to feel something, anything, other than the overwhelming sense of responsibility that weighed her down. But no matter how hard she tried, she felt nothing but emptiness. Her dreams, her desires, her freedom, they all seemed so distant, so unreachable now. The baby cried softly in her arms, and Amina could only stare down at her, unsure of what to do. It was as though a wall had been built between them, one that neither love nor tenderness could tear down. The villagers celebrated, but Amina remained detached, her mind far from the festivities. They spoke of how the child would grow up to be a strong, beautiful girl, but Amina couldn't share in their excitement. She felt as if her life was slipping away, bound forever to a future she didn't want. Amina's mind was in turmoil. She couldn't escape the thought that her life as she had known it was over. She couldn't see a way forward with a child. The thought of giving up her dreams was unbearable. She walked around the village, hiding her feelings behind a quiet smile. She couldn't bring herself to tell anyone what she was truly feeling. Then, one evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Amina found herself standing by the river. The waters stretched out before her, dark and mysterious, as they flowed endlessly toward the horizon. The sound of the river's current was soothing, yet in that moment, it felt like an invitation. Amina looked down at her baby, sleeping peacefully in her arms. She thought about the future, the long years of sleepless nights, the struggles of raising a child alone. She thought about the freedom she would lose, the adventures she would never experience. The river seemed to call her, offering the freedom she so desperately wanted. The thought was dark, but it seemed to make sense. If I throw this child into the river, I will be free, she whispered to herself. The idea shocked her at first, but the more she thought about it, the more it seemed like the only way out. The river could take her child away, and with it, her responsibilities. She could finally live the life she had always dreamed of. But as the idea settled in her mind, so did the weight of it. This was not just a decision about her future, it was about a life. Could she really do this? Could she really give up her child in exchange for freedom? The days after Amina's decision were filled with a strange mixture of dread and determination. She could not shake the thought of the river, its powerful currents calling to her in a way that felt almost magical. Every time she walked near it, she felt an urge to return. The thought of throwing her child into the water, to rid herself of the responsibility she didn't want, grew stronger with each passing day. The river, with its endless flow, seemed to offer the perfect solution to her problem. There was no way out of the life she had been thrust into, except by making the ultimate sacrifice. Amina began to convince herself that this was the only way. She would never be free as long as she had a child. That night, Amina lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart raced as she thought of the child she had brought into the world, a child she could not love, a child who represented the life she had lost. She thought of the river again, its calming waters that could wash away her worries, take away her burden, and set her free. She stood up from her bed, the decision made. Tomorrow, she would take the baby to the river. The night was long, and Amina couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, the weight of her decision pressing on her chest like a stone. In the darkness, her mind was full of thoughts of freedom, of adventure, of a life without the chains of motherhood. Her heart ached, not because of the baby she had brought into the world, but because of the life she felt she was losing. The little one lying beside her, so innocent and fragile, was not the future Amina had dreamed of. She had no idea how to care for her, how to love her, how to be a mother. Amina sat up in bed, gazing out the window at the moonlight reflecting off the river. She could hear the gentle murmur of the water in the distance. The river seemed to be calling her, beckoning her with its promise of release, of freedom. It was so close, just a short walk from her home, and everything would be over. Her dreams would be hers again. The plan was simple. She would take the baby to the river at the break of dawn, when the villagers were still asleep. She would walk quietly to the water's edge and, without hesitation, release her from her arms. The river would take her away, and Amina would never have to face the responsibility of motherhood again. Amina knew what she was about to do was wrong, but the thought of freedom overwhelmed her. She had convinced herself that this was the only way. As the hours passed, the plan solidified in her mind. Tomorrow, she would do it. As the first light of morning touched the sky, Amina stood by the window, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was still and cool, and the village was quiet. In her arms, the baby slept soundly, unaware of the decision that had been made for her. Amina looked down at the child, so small, so helpless. The guilt began to claw at her chest, but she quickly pushed it away. She couldn't turn back now. For a long moment, Amina stood frozen. She looked at the child, and for the first time since her birth, she felt a flicker of something. Was it love? Or was it simply a pang of regret for the life she had chosen? Amina pushed the thought aside. This was not the time for hesitation. She had made up her mind. With trembling hands, she wrapped the baby in a blanket and gently cradled her in her arms. The house was silent, the stillness broken only by the soft sound of the baby's breathing. Amina took one last look around the room. There would be no turning back. The moment she stepped outside, the village felt strangely distant, as if it no longer belonged to her. The path to the river was familiar, yet it now seemed like a journey into the unknown. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her heart, but she continued forward, step by step, her feet moving as if on their own. Amina stood at the riverbank, her heart beating wildly in her chest. The river stretched out before her, its waters flowing swiftly and effortlessly, as if it were waiting for her. The baby was still asleep in her arms, innocent, unaware of the fate that awaited her. Amina looked down at the child. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on Amina's soul. She felt a sudden rush of emotions: fear, guilt, sadness, and above all, doubt. Was this truly the right thing to do? Could she really go through with it? The child stirred in her arms, and Amina's heart skipped a beat. She fought back tears, but they threatened to spill over. How could she take a life? The thought seemed so wrong, yet the voice inside her whispered that this was the only way out. She looked out over the river, the current rushing by, unstoppable. She felt an overwhelming sense of finality. The moment of choice had arrived. Amina's hands trembled as she gazed down at her child. She had never felt more torn, more alone. But the thought of a life trapped in motherhood, a life without freedom, was unbearable. She had never wanted to be a mother. She had never asked for this. In a moment of weakness, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and made the choice that would change her life forever. With trembling hands, Amina held her baby at the edge of the river. The baby's tiny form seemed so fragile, so innocent. Amina's heart twisted in agony, but she pushed the feeling away. This was what she had decided. She was doing this for herself, for the life she had always dreamed of. She couldn't be a mother, not now, not ever. The river's current was strong that day. The water rushed forward with power, as if it knew the weight of the decision being made at its banks. Amina closed her eyes, her breath shallow and quick. For a brief moment, she thought she heard the river whispering to her, but she couldn't understand the words. She shook her head, dismissing it. There was no time for thoughts of anything but what she had to do. With one swift motion, Amina released the baby into the water. The current swept her away almost immediately, carrying her downstream, disappearing into the distance. Amina stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had done it. The baby was gone. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The river flowed calmly, as if nothing had happened. Amina's eyes were wide with disbelief. The moment felt surreal, as though it hadn't really happened. But the empty feeling in her chest told her otherwise. She turned away, her legs unsteady. The weight of her decision settled in, and Amina felt a sharp pain in her heart. She had thrown her child away. As Amina stumbled away from the riverbank, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air felt heavier, the world around her darker. She felt as though she had crossed a line, a point of no return. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she had just done. Could she truly be free now? Or had she condemned herself to something far worse? Just as she was about to leave the riverbank, she heard a soft voice. It was gentle at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. "You have taken a life," the voice said, its tone calm but firm. "And now, you must live with the consequences." Amina froze, her heart racing. She looked around, But no one was there. The voice seemed to come from the river itself. The water, once calm, now swelled around the stones, as if reacting to the words. "You will never know the joy of motherhood again," the voice continued. "For the life you cast away will be the one that haunts you forever." Amina's blood ran cold. She tried to dismiss the voice, to convince herself it was just a figment of her imagination. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. The river, the spirit of the river, had spoken, and its words would follow her for the rest of her life.